institutions. So are we all ready for the second panel discussion? Let me invite the panelists now. First and foremost, I'd like to invite on stage Ms. Karuna Nandi, an advocate at the Supreme Court of India, an international lawyer. She also works with governments to contribute to constitutional, legal drafting and policy. Ms. Nandi has been listed by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2022-23, and her legal works include fighting for the rights of the Bhopal gas victims, contributing to the 2013 anti-rape laws, also the Right to Food Act. So a very warm welcome, Ms. Karuna. Our second panelist is Muskan Tibrewala, a non-binary lawyer who works on gender and sexual equality in law and its intersections with marginalized identities. They practice in the courts of Delhi. They have been part of the legal team representing petitioners in constitutional cases before the Supreme Court, such as the marriage equality cases and the criminalization of marital rape. They are currently Assistant Director, Law and Marginalization Clinic, Center for Justice, Law and Society, and work at the clinic focuses on the pro bono legal aid for trans justice. A very warm welcome. Our third panelist is Mr. Rajiv Chopra, Managing Director, Legal Accenture. And can we invite him on stage and also congratulate him, because this morning he's been conferred the SKOCH ILF Award for his contribution and service to law. Mr. Rajiv is an exceptional legal professional with over 2 decades of experience. And after successful private practice, he ventured into in-house roles in 2003, representing multinational corporations in various legal matters that range from advisory, litigation and arbitration, project finance, major infra projects, and foreign direct investments. A very warm welcome, Rajiv ji. And the fourth panelist is Mr. Mihir Srivastav. Please come up on stage, an author, artist. He's worked for nearly 2 decades with leading national dailies like The Helka, India Today, and Outlook, and cover a host of issues that range from politics, environment, wildlife, and investigations. He's got a couple of books to his credit, and lately he's been involved in making documentaries. He's a painter by hobby, because like writing, he believes art is also a medium that helps him to document people and the times. A very warm welcome. And please also welcome the moderator for the panel discussion, Dr. Gursharan Dhanjal, Vice Chairman with the SKOCH Group. So it's over to the moderator on the panel discussion, Diversity Commission, Equality for All. Thank you.
Thank you. A very interesting, a very sensitive, and a very touchy subject that we are dealing with. And I am handling an experience of more than 100 years across, put together my fellow panelists, 25 years versus 100 years. So I have an onerous task on hand. Talking of diversity, we've heard the previous panelists speak on the Uniform Civil Code, and the subject that we are going to be dealing with is no different in sequel before or after than the Uniform Civil Code, because it also pertains to equality in the society. Now, talking of India, we've been a very, very a tolerant society. We have also been a very colorful society. We have also been a very adjusting and accommodating society. The very first thing that comes to my mind is, I think, Karan, you pointed out that I'm wearing very bright colors today. It did not occur to me that I'm wearing bright colors. I'm wearing my regular colors. But why is it that a bright color is associated only with women? Why is it that Mihir, who is dressed in multicolor, right from socks to his shirt, is associated only with women? And why men are to be wearing only blacks, men in black? Why not men in color? You know, these are the questions which is what have been coming to our mind. Why is it that we do not have choice, a personal, and the other person I'm concerned about whether it is going to be acceptable to him or not, or her, or they. So as he, she, they, whatever circumstances that we have been going through, it needs to be fixed at a level where it is not only acceptable, it has to be corrected both in terms of constitution, it has to be corrected both in terms of a body that needs to be created wherein it is given a structure. So coming from that, if we are looking at Article 14 for that matter, it talks about equality. It doesn't go beyond sex, caste, color, creed, and sex. Talking of Article 19, freedom of speech and expression, but have we actually, because whatever was defined, that was 1947, prior to that, Constituent Assembly, all the debates, 1951, 52, thereafter, no discussion. Only recently that we have started talking about it. Therefore, it becomes an emergent issue in front of us that how is it moving forward? What should be the constitutional position? And that is something which is going to be acceptable. So Karuna, I want to start with you that when it comes to constitution, what is it that needs to be done to fix it at that level?
Thank you for that eloquent introduction to this panel. The queer movement is one that has made advances at a rate that is much faster than a number of other movements. Decriminalization is something that happened way before anyone expected it to. And also, you know, I had to pay a tribute here to the judgment of Justice Shah and Justice Muralidhar that was so robust that, and cited and didn't just cite, elaborated on the relevant constitutional provisions in a way that made it clear that discrimination was not an option and criminalization had to go. To the extent that when it came to the Supreme Court, the government took a step back, and it was Kaushal, a busybody, that then went to court and said, and brought a judgment that is, I think, a blot on constitutional law, in which it was said that because it's a minuscule minority, it is not something that needs to be done, which is, of course, contrary to any conception of a constitution which protects that single person against the might of the state. This, of course, was corrected then in Puttaswamy, in which not just Justice Chandrachud, also Justice Kaul and other judges said that this has no place. That Kaushal versus Naz has no place. And then it was removed. Now, I think that other movements should wisely take heed as to why these advances have happened and why they've happened so fast. I mean, it's interesting. What's interesting also is that the women's movements in India have always been very closely entwined with the queer movements and have supported each other. And now, I think today, the idea of the non-binary and the fact that it frees us from these boxes, the fact that we would not then have to think about ascribed characteristics, ascribed performances of gender, whether that be wearing black suits all the time, beautiful yellow, by the way, and or on the other hand, performing gender as women, which is much more imposed and much more boxed in many different ways. In terms of constitutionality, you know, we have come a long way. We're not where Article 14 was. It's not just articulation of equality before law. Article 15(3) also provides for enhanced protection and strict scrutiny on the basis of inter alia, or rather, amongst other things, sex. Now, can anyone tell me, my young lawyer friends included, how sex has been elaborated on by the Supreme Court? Does sex still mean sex? Does sex still mean biological male-female characteristics? You can just raise your hand and use your booming lawyer voices. or non-lawyer voices? Does anyone want to volunteer?
Let's have somebody from the audience. Any delegates? Anybody would like to say anything?
Even if it's a partial answer.
Yep. We are an open platform. We are ready to hear
Come on,
anything.
Rishika.
That sex under Article 15 would also include, as the Supreme Court has held in the Anuj Garg judgment, stereotypical understandings of sex. So not just the fact that someone is identifying as male or female, biological sex, but also stereotypical understandings of sex and how that is, like you said, boxing and forcing certain gender performances on people who are identifying as certain sexes.
Excellent point. Anuj Garg brings the strict scrutiny standard of Ruth Bader Ginsburg into our law. But in addition, the Nalsa judgment says that sex is not just restricted to a biological sex. It includes gender, but it also makes queerness then a protected category, right? And there are very clear affirmations of protections for queer people, trans people, including something that has become a sort of hot button point today. Of course, there's marriage equality, and I'm one of the council's leading arguments in that matter. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And Muskan has excellently assisted me in that matter, and also Ishan and Aman and now Rishika. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But there is work that has already been done. Nalsa is a fantastic judgment. It's really important. It includes, in constitutional terms, the ability of queer people and trans people to be recognized as socially and economically backward classes. Now, this is very significant, right? Because this means that it opens the door to horizontal reservations. Now, unlike horizontal rights, which is something that, is very easily confusing, horizontal reservations means that since you have, for example, you have Dalit or SC women, you have Dalit, you have ST men and queer people and women and disabled people, right? And in the general category, you have women, disabled people. There is the idea of cross-cutting identities, right? So we think it's been spoken of in terms of intersectionality, but you should not have to choose between being a disabled person and being a Dalit. Because you may not be a Dalit and you are still disabled and in the general category, I'd say you're not then getting reservation, right? And it can't be a separate category in competition with the others. So therefore, what these movements are seeking is horizontal reservation versus vertical reservation. In this regard, there are a number of steps that have been taken forward. In Uttarakhand, for example, horizontal reservation for women has been recognized. This is essential. This is extremely important. Horizontal reservation for disabled persons has been recognized. Also extremely important. So now, why then, when 15(3) of the Constitution of India recognizes that gender is a category meriting heightened protection, would you then not grant, is there something going on there?
No, it's all right. Yep.
Would you not grant the same gender protections to people of a different gender? It makes no sense. When we speak of marriage equality, there was an interesting elaboration of different types of ways in which you can get married. I think Rohan Kochar had spoken of Parsi law and Baha'i law, etc. And that's one of the things that I had argued, that the common law, the life of the law is not just logic, it is experience. And the common law is a great vehicle to then recognize queer marriage and to take it forward on a case-by-case basis. The Special Marriage Act, in fact.
I'll interrupt you here. In fact,
Sure.
you brought in 3-4 very important points. I'll come back to you because my next question pertains to the same.
Certainly.
In
You
between,
know our lawyers are, we can go on forever.
and our judges are. which I am not. No, Rajiv, I will come to you third. So I move over to Muskan because that's another viewpoint which is going to come up. So put together, then I'm going to be asking you a couple of questions there. So Muskan, how do we work on the equality bit?
Hi. How do we work on equality? Equality is an inherent right. It's recognized as something that we all have by virtue of the Constitution. And there are several ways that all of us in our everyday lives work towards equality. As a child, you would want the same things that your brother or sister would get. So it starts from home, it starts from any authority figure, and there's also like larger ideas of equality in terms of government, in terms of policy, in terms of rights. So I think we all have a place in the fight for equality, and we're all doing it in small and large ways. As lawyers, our fight for equality is through policy making, through petitioning the court.
In your personal life, not as a lawyer.
In my personal life?
Is that something we can put anyone on the spot on, really?
In my personal life, equality has been, so I was assigned a woman at birth, and a large part of my personal journey through childhood has been to fight through these gender ramifications of what it means to be a woman. And I think we recognize that we're people with multiple identities. So our religious identity, our caste identities, our gender identities, whether it's man, woman, non-binary, trans, anything, all of that has certain social implications, and it means a different fight for every person. So the same way, I've had my fights, Mam's had her fights, we've all had our fights. So for me, it's also been my trans identity and how that means that I would like to fight that through with society, with law, with legal recognition. So yeah, several aspects to it.
Now, Rajiv, let me come to you. Particularly during COVID, it so happened that the large multinationals, primarily housed in Gurgaon, they were told to let the women go by 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And if they stay back beyond that, you have to provide office, to and fro, and all those kind of logistics and stuff like that. That did not actually result in good things for women. Women were laid off. So that is discrimination at workplace. And now when we talk of LGBTQ community and queers and people like that, how do we maintain equality at workplace? How do we empower them? Do you have any such policies at your place which take care of it?
So thank you for the question. And I've now very quickly realized that on this panel between Karuna and Muskan, I have no match for the eloquence, nor the court craft, or whatever. I'm rustic because I did litigation only for 6 years. So I have to play this a little bit on the back foot in terms of firepower. But that said, to your first question, I know there are corporations and there are corporations, right? During COVID, speaking for my organization, and by the way, just to introduce the organization, because much of what I'm going to say is also relevant in the context of what I represent. So we are 320,000 men and women in India. It's a large workforce. And of course, our stated global priority is 50% women workforce by 2025. And as we sit in 2023, we have achieved 47%. Within the legal team, we are 450 strong lawyers doing multiple things. In India, we are much, much over 50%. And then coming to your specific question before I come to what we do as an organization for diversity, inclusion, etc. Um, we, we are always a virtual organization. Even before COVID, we used to go twice or thrice a week to the office. During COVID, we all went virtual. And we continue to be virtual. Now we sort of between ourselves just to sort of, have some FaceTime. We only go once in a week. So very few people people out of 320,000, you could say maybe 10% people, given the nature of their job, they need to come every day to office. Otherwise, we're all virtual. So those things where, women were disadvantaged doesn't hold true for at least my organization, but I can relate to that. Because women, for us is a stated objective. So to get to 50% is a global priority, and we are a publicly traded firm. If we fail, it has an implication on our shareholders. So it's important for us. Now, coming to some of the diversity principles. Now, I'm kind of taking it that a large focus is LGBTQ+. But I just want to make a mention that for Accenture, LGBTQ is right up there, but amongst other things as well. So gender equality is one. Persons with disabilities another, a side of LGBTQ, and ethnic and racial diversity in workplace is also very relevant and important for us, at least globally, if not as much in India. And we believe that the real power of diversity lies dormant without creating an environment, and where people are feeling integrated, feel that they belong, and feel open to expressing their uniquenesses. Now, and specifically to LGBT, I just want to tell you some of the practices and policies that we have. And I've lost much of my sharpness as well, so I have to rely on my notes. We have for LGBTQ, first of all, it's a very normal thing in Accenture. My boss, for instance, who sits out of UK, is a gay. And to me, it's really irrelevant. Many of our colleagues who we work with are gays, and at least from speaking for myself, and I know for people I work with, we don't even think about their sexual status. I mean, really, it's a nothing issue for us. But coming specifically to LGBTQ, we have provided progressive medical benefits, policies and programs. We offer training, networking support, and mentoring of LGBTQ folks. We have a strong ally group, 119,000 people globally, many of them Accenture leaders. In fact, majority of leaders are allies. And then we have successful internal campaigns to normalize the use of inclusive pronouns for LGBTQ colleagues. We have employee resources group and an allied network that creates a safe place for people to come out. And we have many people who have actually come out in the workplace, but they haven't come out in their personal space. So we have such an environment that people feel safe to say that within Accenture, but still hide it from their families. So we have those instances as well. And I just want to make some specific mentions about what we do or what we've done in the recent past to sort of make sure that our differential diversity is addressed. So we have equal opportunity policies for transgender persons. And it details out the commitment to creating an inclusive and safe place. We have what's called the Hues of Rainbow, which is an initiative which has powerful conversations on trans inclusion, parenting children who identify as LGBTQ, importance of mental wellness, and coming out stories within the Pride community. We have Pride mentoring programs. We have a very important training, which is L3, which is basically, it's about how to normalize the concept, right? And many of us attend that training, and it's an important one where not only our LGBT colleagues, but also many of us who are not from that community participate in that training to understand their thoughts and learn to appreciate each other. And in terms of specific, I just want to make a specific mention of some of the things we've done in terms of providing medical cover to our community, which is we were amongst the first companies in India to introduce medical cover for gender reassignment for our people. We modified our parental leave policies to focus on importance of caregiving and therefore, versus gender binaries to support LGBTQ. We have medical insurance programs to give our people the choice to personalize their medical insurance. Our people can choose who they mandate as beneficiaries, including their partners, even if they are LGBTQ. And we have now extended our medical insurance benefits to include facial reconstruction for transgender people.
So, if I may ask at this moment,
Yeah.
this is an open question. You also quipped something in between that is part of the law, which is what perhaps they are following. Why is it loaded in favor? Why are you saying that we are doing it specifically for the community? Why are you doing it specifically for the LGBTQ? Is it an equal treatment or a preferential treatment? So I'll come to you later. You quipped in between. If it is actually part of the law, then why is it done that way? Before I move over to Mihir, a quick one from you.
It's not preferential treatment because the default is upper caste Hindu male. Let's be clear about that, right? So the fact that, and I must congratulate you, Rajiv, that of the not just the amazing number of things that you're doing, but also the way in which you express vulnerability, and the openness and the excitement to learn from each other, And so I think that's something to really recognize because the default is upper caste Hindu male, able-bodied, straight, right? Whether it is the media, whether it's NGOs, whether it's the Supreme Court, whether it's anywhere else. So diversity means actually representativeness. It means the absence of that quota, taking away that quota, because essentially it's that quota which has resulted in the overrepresentation of one group, which also must be represented, but not to this level.
Got it.
Right? And also just very quickly on the corporate, there's a lot that we can do, even without a law. Now, I know I have the privilege of anticipating the next question you're going to ask, so I won't address that now. But absent a law, a non-requires a certain type of diversity. There's, of course, what Accenture is already doing. But we must also remember that the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act requires, under Section 19, workshops. It requires a committee to deal with any kind of complaint and discrimination, etc. It requires an entire structure, it requires a policy. So what have we done with, for example, Penguin Random House, that is one of our clients that we are working with on these issues? We have created an equality policy, not just an anti-sexual harassment policy, an equality policy that also then addresses not just LGBTQ, but LGBTQIA+. What is the IA? It's intersex, it's asexual. We must recognize that not all of us are inclined towards any kind of sexuality, right? And plus means that these discrete sort of categories leave out a lot of people whose experiences haven't been acknowledged, right? So once we did that in our workshops, it became clear that even through the door of the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, There are progressive companies can do a lot. And the reason that I do these workshops is because there is a transformation that we all experience together, of listening to each other, of serving the bottom line. Because when you stop thinking about how to do this balancing act and navigate being a woman or a queer person and, in the variety of circumstances that we have, and being taken seriously or, performing, right? Because women have to be much better than the next guy, right? Also true of queer people, right? Then you're free to fly.
Good one there. So, in fact, it leaves two questions in my mind. What, Rajiv, perhaps you're doing is possibly your global best practices, which is what is being done everywhere. What, Karuna, you're talking about is part of the legal position to do with different aspects of life. But we are not looking at the elephant as such. We are looking at either the trunk or the tail. So what it actually requires is something which puts a structure around it. I have Mr. Habibullah with us, who was the chairman of the National Minorities Commission. And it also so happens that the commission did not come up in the 50s or the 60s, it happened in the 80s. And not that minorities did not exist in the country, they always existed. But thought and giving them a place of equality, the protection of their rights and so on and so forth happened much later. Probably time is now ripe. I mean, Human Rights Commission, several commissions happen to take care of a particular societal, social, or otherwise a problem or an issue. Time is ripe that we put all our thoughts and all our hats together in a structure, in a quasi-judicial, quasi-constitutional, or otherwise an empowered body, which possibly can be called a diversity commission, which looks into these issues of empowerment, looks into these issues of equality, and so on and so forth. So what, Mihir, to your mind, if we talk about that, a structure should be, what should a diversity commission should be doing, and why exactly do we need it? I mean, was it needed yesterday, or it's needed tomorrow, or needed today?
Not just, I have documented people from a very individual perspective, and I won't talk about law and all these things, but what I would want to concentrate on individual. I think given the technology, given the scope of experience, given, asexuality, as Karuna mentioned, could just be that we are not, we are attracted to some sort of instrument, an electrical instrument that satisfies us more than dealing with fellow individuals. So the point of the matter is that it's about the micro, the human. So the concentration has to be on human. It's not just about a certain identity group, but also infusion of technology, which I feel will determine how we live in future and how we deal with and what we get attracted to or influenced with or would want to see or experience. And I think when we look at the micro perspectives, then everything changes. And thankfully, because I have been documenting people, I also like the fact that we also can look at us as a microcosm, as inclusive of everything. And no one identity defines me, and nothing negates me either. I am everything in some measure and nothing in particular. And if we look at this aspect, I think the Constitution, now talking of law, should provide me with a setup where I can live my life full of contradictions, paradoxes. I may be something tomorrow, I may want to do something else, unless and until my freedom to exist in the way I feel like doesn't hamper somebody else's freedom. And which, of course, should allow that I'm very open to people having all kinds of viewpoint on various issues that I may or may not agree with me, but as long as I'm allowed to operate. And of course, freedom is not absolute. My freedom is sort of governed and by others' freedom to exist in the way they feel like. As long as it is within the larger ambit of humanity and constitutional law and law of the land, I'm okay with it. And of course, law of the land will also requires to be changed in light of how people are allowed to lead their life. And I think in this perspective, Diversity Commission can play a great role by creating various sort of ecosystem where people are allowed to exist in the way they feel like.
Great. Sir, I will now draw upon your experience, whatever is being talked about, as far as Diversity Commission is concerned, because a lot of thought has been given to that, and you're coming from.
What exactly would you, but the point that you've made is the idea of a diversity commission, in fact, to replace the minorities commission, because I think the minorities commission tends to accentuate distinctions rather than overcome distinctions. As you probably know, that this commission was set up only in the 90s, and it has now been several years in operation, but it has not been successful in actually eliminating the idea of discrimination. In many cases, it has tended to accentuate that. So a diversity commission would be something that would certainly be better, but even the diversity commission will have to be careful to ensure that by nominating certain sections of the population as being diverse, then you tend to also accentuate their otherness. And in the previous session, of course, we were talking about the other. The idea, of course, is really to promote the idea that there is no other, so far as we as a nation or as a people are concerned. So would a separate commission be the answer, or as Karunaji had mentioned earlier, simply working maybe through little groups in each section of the government, of course, and in the private sector, working towards overcoming this idea. I was interested to hear Karunaji talking of a certain section of people as queer. I would have thought that the word queer is a somewhat derogatory connotation. But I mean, you can answer that after that, but the point that I want to make here is I don't think the answer really lies in setting up more and more commissions. But then where does the answer lie? One would look towards people like you to answer that question.
Well, thank you so much, sir. In fact, you have brought in focus another very important point, which is we, rather than he, she, and they. We, the people of India. So when we say we, then it itself means that we are talking of equality. And we are including all communities, X, Y, Z. And we are not discriminating against anyone. As long as we say that he belongs to this and she belongs to this, that means we are still discriminating and accepting that this is how it is. What is the merit in this argument? Mihir.
I'm glad you raised that point. That's basically what I'm hinting at. What I'm trying to say is that I should be allowed to lead my life, irrespective of what I call myself. And that in itself, I mean, which is, of course, a deconstruction theory says, well, if you don't want to be anything, you become something. But the point of the matter is that I don't want to be associated. I want a setup where I need not identify with something or an identity to be myself. So all the commissions that have been formed so far say, well, protect, because we all feel a certain kind of victimhood. So it is kind of a positive reinforcement which says, well, I have my freedom and I should be allowed to lead a life of a free individual without having to sort of adhere to a certain identity and or belong to something. I don't need to belong to something to be able to lead a life, which is to say that I sometimes am confused, because I don't know what I identify to. And sometimes because I've been dealing with individuals at a very intense level, I realize that I tend to identify with someone or the other. So I relive them in such huge measures, and which also indicates to the fact that I am that person. It's just how we experience life is what it shapes us. So my idea is that since environment shapes me, I should be allowed to shape the environment in a way that I don't sort of impinge upon others' freedom to do this. So the idea of diversity commission is that let's allow an eco space where people can exist the way they want to without essentially adhering to any sort of identity. And it's uniform. It's uniform in its values.
Yeah. Muskan.
So when you said we the people of India, right, which is from the constitution, but we're all aware that the Constituent Assembly was not diverse. There were merely 3 women of more than 200 people. It wasn't representative. It wasn't an elected body. There was no referendum when our constitution was adopted. It took the Nalsa judgment in 2014 to give legal recognition to transgender people. And what that means is that before that, the law didn't recognize that transgender people exist, like legally. That there are certain cultural communities in India, like the Hijras, like Kothis, like Kinars, and that these people are legal citizens who deserve full civil rights. So when we say we the people, when we say we don't want to other and isolate people, the point is that the existing structures work in a way, as ma'am was saying, that do isolate people. And therefore, in order to come to a place where there is equality, where there is these ideas of everyone can self-actualize to be who they want to be, to work in an environment where they don't feel inhibited or limited by their identities or their desires. In order to do that, there have to be affirmative steps. There has to be affirmative recognition. There has to be a minority commission that recognizes that certain groups of minorities go through limitations and prohibitions that other people just don't. As ma'am was saying, there is an explicit recognition of this in the Constitution with 15.3, which says special provisions need to be made for women and for children, which means that we are going to give additional benefits, additional laws to uplift certain communities, which is what brings us to an equality, because we don't start off from a default sense of equality. So having a minority commission, whether or not a diversity commission, and where it can situate in terms of the existing mechanisms that we have in government, is an important question to ask, because even with laws that we have, ma'am brought up the POSH Act, we have the Transgender Act, we have the Rights of Disabilities Act, we have special acts for special communities which establish bodies of their own. So the Rights of Disabilities Act has the state and central disability advisory councils. You have the Transgender Act, which is supposed to have a National Transgender Council, and the state and national welfare boards. And we're all aware that these welfare boards aren't formed in most states. They're underfunded, they're not able to work when our existing implementing mechanisms aren't working. We have so many bodies. We have the National Commission of Women, we have state commissions of women, we have the NHRC. We have bodies. The question is, and we're all aware that these bodies aren't working to do what their mandate is to what is possible. A lot of people are working, there's a lot of work being done, but so much is also not being done. So can the vision of this diversity commission, can its mandate be something that can make existing mechanisms work better? That's what I'd like to pose it.
Excellent. So just on the go, one minute each. You're handing over the baton to him. All right, Rajiv. Let's hear your views on diversity commission. What should it do? 1 minute, please.
So yeah, first of all, I agree with Meher and Muskan completely. So don't get me wrong, because what I'm going to say is on a tangent, wearing my corporate hat only. Yeah, what I completely 100% endorse and agree with what they said. Now, my experience with some of these commissions has been as a corporate executive, that they're mostly put to misuse by people. So what happens is, there's a women's commission, for instance. Now, there are women who have, concerns. They raise it with us. We go take them through either the POSH process, or even otherwise are, misconduct process and so on and so forth. Investigation is done. These people keep escalating, and they just don't want to hear an answer which is not conducive. And then they knock at the door of Women Commission, which for us is an unnecessary loop to close then, right? Because the point I'm trying to make is that we as a multinational company have solid processes. We are going to do our best to to bring out the facts and take disciplinary action where needed. But sometimes people don't want to hear it, no. That's number one. Number two, again, speaking from a corporate lens, right? Take the example of, going a little oblique here, Maternity Benefits Act. Accenture introduced, and many others, we introduced 6 months much before the law amended, much before. Now, the law came for 6 months. And now what the problem is that, for companies like Accenture, whether there is a diversity commission or not, we are going to stay ahead of the law. But then when you create choke points, then where people can still be deployed will stop deploying them because of the choke points you create by such commissions. That's all the point I'm trying to make.
Karuna?
Voluntariness is wonderful, but voluntariness has not brought us very far. Let's be clear about that. Voluntariness has not brought us very far in terms of gender equality, in terms of gender equality in its real sense, which includes queerness, or in terms of equality of religion, equality of caste. Law is an expression of justice. And justice cannot be dependent on the charity of the good-hearted. What does justice then mean? Justice means that we need a law that is a non-discrimination law. That it's not just that I can go to an internal committee if somebody touches me and says, hey baby, which is a crime under section 354, right? But if somebody yells at me and says, you're stupid because you're a woman, then there should be some mechanism that I can go through. And that mechanism, companies like Bertelsmann, companies like PRH, and I'm not just blowing the trumpet of my own clients, but also I'm sure, other companies like Accenture and others, right, are doing great work in this regard. But it cannot be voluntary. Because the largest proportion of our country works in the informal sector. A large proportion works within homes. So what do we need? What we need is a law. And it's not just going to be another law. It means that there will be a law that mandates non-discrimination. Actually, there was a private member's bill, and it's a very, very good bill that was tabled. And that was rejected a number of times. And let me give you an analogy. For those of you who are lawyers, tort law is very undeveloped in this country, right? So, therefore, if one person damages another, there is if I had time, I would go into the room, but we don't have time. There's a duty of care, there has to be breach of that duty, and there has to be damage, right? Like we all remember from law school, because we don't actually have that many tort cases that come up. What is an area in which tort law has flourished? The consumer courts. Because it's been codified, and there's a whole structure of courts that adjudicate these issues, right? In the Bhopal cases, we see a massive failure of tort law because of its lack of development. So what do we need here? We need a law, we need a structure of, not a commission. If you look at the NCW and the egregiousness with which it is acting today, and if you look at, anyway, we don't need another commission. What we need is rights, enforceable through remedies. We need courts, and the writ courts are already overburdened. We need a system of courts that are specialized, tribunals, I suppose, and with challenges before the High Courts and the Supreme Court.
Great, thank you so much. So we actually have a diversity in the panel itself. Two, going in for the Diversity Commission, and two, saying that it is not required. We need to otherwise fix and strengthen the parallel system. There is no need to go in for another commission, if I get it right.
Yeah. So I'll
concluding
just,
remarks.
Yeah. my point of view. I don't know whether they're concluding. The point is that there is a Human Rights Commission. So whether it's minorities, whether it's SC, ST, ideally it should have taken care of because they're all under this one preview. As a matter of idea, I mean, I don't know whether it'll be effective or not, but here, for a change, we are looking at the person and not to the person's attribute. And I think that in itself, I mean, whether it's effective or not, but the very aspect that a commission which will have representation from all kinds of people who would believe in the micro, the individual, and allowing that individual to exist in the way that he wants or she wants to, in the way he wants or she wants to pan out, in the way he wants to work, to engage with the society at large, or not engage with the society, deal with technology, is a very good starting point. As to somehow look at the macro picture from a micro perspective. Whether it leads to doing something or not is a matter of debate, but I think it is a good thing to start with.
Thank you. It's time to wind up the discussion, although it's getting very interesting by each minute that we are.
I have an objection to panelists weren't served beer.
Scotch for Scotch, please. All right, so in fact, it's a good debate whether to go in for another commission or not. What will this serve? What should be the terms of reference? What should be the scope, and so on and so forth. In fact, brainstorming has actually started today. Maybe 20 days wind back, I wrote a discussion paper which has actually been published in the Festschrift, which was released in the morning, and that is available outside. Do read the paper, but to read the paper you have to shell out $600 perhaps, which is what they're charging for the book. Otherwise it's $795. You're getting it at a special price. Do share your opinion with us, because by January, February timeframe, we would like to come up with a Scotch position paper on the diversity debate that we have started today, and look forward to each and every one of you being a participant of that. Of course, you can agree or you can disagree, the choice is yours. So thank you, panelists, for being with us and participating with your open hearts. Thank you once again. So, let's come forward for a group photograph. I think let's come in.
Thank all the panel members.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. So just to reiterate that